Resort. We are located in a Banff National Park, which is part of a UNESCO Heritage Site, Canadian Rocky Mountains National Park, and it's also located on traditional lands of the Treaty 7 Nations. My name is Misha, and I'm going to be your guide today. We are about to go on a night tour. And the first step that's in front of us is the hardest one of the tour. That's to put the snowshoes on. So, if you want to put them on the ground, there is R for right and L for left. And you want to place your foot slightly over the main feet. And these two straps are gonna go over your foot. This one gonna go behind the heel. Try it. I'm gonna go around and make sure that you guys are doing well. Good job. Nice. Looks like we are ready to go. Are you warm? Feeling okay?
Yeah.
Everything? So we are gonna go on a night tour that's about an hour and a half long. We're gonna cover about 2 kilometers, and we're gonna see the resort in unique perspective. When the lift stops running, the resort actually stays active, which you can see behind me right away. And when we step off the main runs, we can discover a world of darkness and light and how it comes to life. So we're gonna see that. Before that, because we are still in a very busy place, we're gonna make sure that we are staying safe. So I'm just gonna let those guys know that we are about to come. Control from 29, control. We have a night tour starting right now. 3 guests, 1 guide. We're going to be following us, ski out, Fish Creek parking lot, and coming down by the easy street. Thank you. Ready?
Yeah, ready.
Let's go.
So we have thousands of skiers that come here to Lake Louise Ski Resort to ride the slopes each day. And after a full day of skiing, the slopes, they need some maintenance. Every morning we have fresh corduroy, those lines that you see in the snow. But how do those lines get there, and how do we maintain the snow? So we have 2 teams of people that come out every night. And they brave the dark and the cold while the rest of us are at home in bed. And they're the ones that make sure that the slopes are fresh and ready for us to come and ride in the morning. One of those teams is the groomers team. So they drive the snowcats. And the snowcats are basically like big bulldozers, but they're specially made for snow. They have big tracks that help them get up the hills, and they have a big blade on the front of the groomer to push the snow into piles, and then they have a big spinning drum on the back of the snowcat that kind of chews up the snow, and then there's flaps on the back that come down that smooth the snow out and leave those lines, that corduroy in the snow that we all love to ride on. Sometimes on the really steep slopes, you'll get what's called a winch cat. And winch cats have big cranes that come off the top of the groomer machine. And they hook that winch up to an anchor at the very top of the hill, and that helps them pull more snow up the slope. That's actually one of the hazards that we have to look out for when we're out here at night, is those long metal cables bouncing up and down in the snow. And so they always call those out on the radio, and they put up stop signs when they do have those out. So we have the groomers that are out here every night, and
And again.
Those are some snowmakers going out to work right now. So we have the grooming machines that are out on the slopes every night, leaving that fresh corduroy. But because we have these big snow bulldozers, we're able to do special things with the snow, like build big terrain parks with the big jumps. And we're also able to build a tube park where the tubes come down. Another thing we're able to do, and we host the FIS World Cup ski race. And Lake Louise is actually the very first stop in the schedule every winter. And the last week in November is when we actually host the men's competition. And then the women's is usually the first week in December. And we're one of only a handful of venues in all of North America that actually hosts the World Cup downhill. And so we're real lucky here, and yeah, it's a special event for us. It gets our season started. The other team of people out there making the fresh snow for the morning are the snowmakers. Snowmakers. Snowmakers, they use snow guns in order to make snow. And this right here is a fan gun. So the basic idea behind making snow is you need an airstream. And then you'll notice at the front of the snow gun, there's a whole bunch of nozzles. So in the back of that barrel, there's an aluminum fan blade that spins around really fast, creates an airstream, and then the nozzles on the front spray out streams of water into that airstream. Those little tiny droplets go up into the air, and they freeze in the air, and then they fall down as snow. And that's the basic idea. And it's not quite that simple. There's lots and lots of factors that go into the quality of the snow. The main two factors are air temperature. It has to be cold. And snowmakers also have to take into account humidity, how wet the air is. If the air is really, really wet, you have a really hard time making snow. The drier, the colder, the better the quality of the snow. And that's actually called wet bulb. It's a different type of measuring. But the way that snowmakers, they check the quality of the snow is they'll come out in front of their gun and they'll stick their arm out. And when the snow falls onto their jacket, if it sticks to their jacket, that means the snow is too wet and they have to turn down the amount of water that they're putting into the snow. If it falls down and it bounces off, that means it's just right. It's nice dry snow and it's going to be really good for skiing. Another thing, because sometimes it gets really, really cold out here at night, like even down to almost negative 30 degrees Celsius. So sometimes when it's really cold, the snowmakers will actually stand in front of the gun on purpose, and their jackets will get wet, and all that wet will freeze into a layer of ice, and they'll walk around with these icy jackets, but it actually provides extra insulation against the wind. And so then when they go inside, they'll actually take their jacket off, leave it outside, so that layer of ice doesn't melt. So we have these two teams that come out and they're on the slopes while the rest of us are at home asleep in bed. Without these two teams working throughout the night, we wouldn't have these clean, fresh slopes that we can ride every day.
dark starts to take over, the stars will start to come to life. Every star tells a story. Every culture across our world has looked up at the stars and felt that connection and felt those stories. Tonight I'm going to focus more on the Greek stories just because that happens to be the way things have worked out. Those are the stories that were recorded the clearest, and just the way cultures have spread, those are the stories most commonly told in Canada. But like I said at the beginning, it's really important to remember that this is the traditional lands of the Treaty 7 nations, and all of the different nations that lived here told different stories, and all of them are phenomenal. But tonight, like I said, I'm going to stick with the Greek stories. So, let's look in this direction first. Does anybody happen to see there's a very well-known constellation over there with 3 stars in it? Does anybody know what it is?
Orion's Belt?
That's right, yeah. Orion's Belt is found right up over here. And so we have the 3 stars of the belt, but it's actually clear enough tonight that we can make out the entire constellation. So, we have the belt. We've got his 2 shoulders, his dagger, and also his bow. So quite a large constellation there, takes up quite a lot of the sky. And that constellation, Orion, is also called the Hunter. And Orion was a hunter. The 2 things he was known for, basically he was a great hunter and he was not really a very nice guy. Just a little further out here, we can see a small cluster of stars. Almost looks like a tiny little dipper, if you're familiar with that one. It's a small clump of stars. It's called Pleiades, also known as the 7 Sisters. And the story of Pleiades is they were the beautiful daughters of Atlas. And they were receiving some unwanted attention from Orion, and so Zeus actually put them up in the sky to give them some distance from Orion, but Orion would not take no for an answer, and he was still continuing to chase them across the night sky. Just behind Orion, if we actually just cast our gaze down this direction just a little bit, we can see Sirius, which is also known as the dog star, and that is the eye of Canis Major, which is Orion's hunting dog. So Orion is hanging out with his dog, chasing after Pleiades. Taurus is also in the sky in that corner, but it's not quite dark enough tonight. We can't quite make out Taurus, but we can make out Gemini, which is kind of fun to see. Those are the twins, the astrological sign. To find Gemini, go back to Orion's belt and draw a line, back to Orion and draw a line from his foot through his shoulder and follow that up, and you will see the twin stars of Gemini. You know, it's not just stories that are shared with these stars. Stars are also have always been really important for navigating. And we can also see tonight Polaris, also called the North Star. So for that, we're going to rotate around to this part of the sky. And to find the North Star, you first have to find the Big Dipper. And the Dipper is over here. There's the tail and there's the dipper part. And the Big Dipper is part of a larger constellation called Ursa Major, which is a bear. And the story behind the bear being up in the sky is that Hercules was going around on his adventures, and he came across a community that was being basically a bit ravaged by a couple of bears. There were 2 mean bears that were going, and there was a couple, it was a bit of a nasty situation. So Hercules showed up, and he grabbed the bear by its tail and swung it around a whole bunch of times, stretching out the tail before letting it fly up into the night sky. And that's why Ursa Major has such a long tail. I'm sure you guys are all well aware of this, but we have a very different approach to bear management in Banff National Park, and we just avoid getting into that nasty situation in the first place. But there's Ursa Major. So to find the North Star, we're going to look at these 2 points within the Big Dipper, and we're going to follow those along all the way up to the North Star. A lot of people are quite surprised that it's not the most bright star in the sky, pales in comparison to Sirius, but it is really, really important. It is the central spot in the night sky. So the North Star stays where it is, and all the rest of the stars in the sky circle around in a kind of a counterclockwise fashion around the North Star. And so the stars are constantly changing in position. They are going to be, if we come out here in a couple hours, they would be significantly twisted, and you come out in a couple months and this time of day and they would be also in a different position. So it's an ongoing process. All the stars are moving. The one star that never ever moves is the North Star Polaris. So really, really critical for navigation. How else do you get around the ocean, especially for ocean travel, trying to explore around. So that's just a couple of really brief stories based off of what we can actually make out clearly tonight. But like I said, it's really important to remember that those are just a couple of Greek stories, and there are many other stories that have shared. Every culture that's ever lived around our planet has looked up at that sky and had the exact same reaction as us tonight. Just, wow, look at them. What's the story that they're trying to tell? And anytime you have a chance to step off into true darkness in the wintertime, the stars will start to come alive and share their own story with you.
I would like to ask everybody to switch off your headlamps. Let your eyes get used to the darkness and look up. The stars are beautiful, aren't they? Yeah. But this place can sometimes offer more. From time to time, you can witness a magnificent light show, the Northern Lights. And people have been fascinated by Northern Lights throughout the ages. First Nations believed that the lights are spirits of the animals they hunted or of their own people. And people travel long distances to be able to see them. But what are they? When you're watching Northern Lights, you're looking at colorful dance between Earth and Sun. And their relationship can be quite literally magnetic. All the dance starts on a sun's surface with the solar magnetic activity, which ejects a cloud of gas. And this gas is called solar wind. And it's full of charged particles of ions. And if Earth happens to be in this dance direction, the dance can begin. The planet Earth is protected by a magnetic shield, and the shield reflects most of the particles away. But the shield is weaker on the poles, and so some of the ion particles enter the atmosphere where they collide with oxygen and nitrogen. And this collision release an energy in form of Northern Lights, like on this picture. And it all depends on where the dance begins. If it is about 240,000 kilometers above the ground, the Earth dresses in red, and we can see red Northern Lights, where the ion particles collide with mostly nitrogen. But we most likely be able to see green and blue dress of planet Earth when the ion particles collide with mostly oxygen in about 80 to 120 kilometers above the ground. So solar activity and ion particles colliding with nitrogen and oxygen and the altitude is all playing a critical role in creation of Northern Lights. And we would have to be really lucky to see them tonight. So I have brought a smaller version for you, so you will have a chance to get the feel of what they're like. I would like you to hold one part.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And when you see and watch the Northern Lights, I would suggest you to put it on your bucket list and go out late at night, look up and watch. And when you will see them for first, second or 10th times, you will know that you're looking at the dance between Earth and Sun and their magnetic relationship.
So turning off our headlamps again and looking towards the ski hill, what do you guys see? What do you see on the ski hill right now?
Little lights.
Yeah, little lights, tiny specks of light. There's a few all over the hill. So those are actually coming from snowmaking guns. Remember the snowmaking equipment John was talking about earlier? So snowmaking happens on the hill 24 hours a day, and it emits light, these tiny things. So the snowmakers need to see what they're doing. So sunlight and moonlight are natural sources of light, but anything man-made, like coming from a snowmaking bulb or a car headlamp or the lights we use in our living room, these are unnatural sources of light. And unnatural sources of light are necessary in our modern world so our society can continue to function after the sun sets. But we have to ask what impact artificial lighting has on wildlife that we share our world with, especially here in the national park. So how many of you have ever heard of or experienced jet lag before? Who's ever been jet lagged? Yeah, okay, so what happens when you're jet lagged? What does it feel like?
Always tired.
Always tired, yeah, a little out of it. It'll be like kind of like your rhythm's been disrupted, right? You're just kind of out of your groove. Yeah, so there's actually a scientific name for that rhythm that's getting interrupted. It's something called your circadian rhythm. So simply put, your circadian rhythm is how your body reacts to changes in natural light and can be noticed most easily when we aren't observing a schedule. So being woken up by the sun gently illuminating your room or a tent is a great example of this. And have you guys ever been backcountry camping? Okay, yeah, so have you ever been backcountry camping? Because I know this happened to me. And you started getting tired when the sun is setting, so you crawl into your sleeping bag and you check your watch and it's only like 7:30. Yeah, that has happened to me a lot. So many of us have jobs or hobbies that demand we override these natural tendencies, and the ski hill is a great example of this. We like to enjoy skiing, but it does demand that we artificially light the snowmaking equipment all throughout the night. Snowmaking happens 24 hours a day. And this is especially true in places closer to the poles like Canada, where the sun sets so early. We need to live our lives, so we combat these natural tendencies with artificial light. So studies on how circadian rhythms affect humans are ongoing, but there have been a few reports on how this affects wildlife throughout the years. So in Southern Australia, for example, there is a military base that emits a lot of natural light, and scientists in the area decided to see how it was affecting wildlife close to it. What they found was that the kangaroos were actually getting pregnant all throughout the year instead of at one specific time like they would naturally. The kangaroos' bodies were no longer getting natural cues from the different levels of light in the changing seasons, and because the females were pregnant whenever, this was really stressing their communities and really harming the mothers, because when the joeys are born, maybe certain food resources aren't available because they're being born at the wrong time of the year. And around the world, bird populations have been observed overeating due to artificial light. So the birds are confused with when daytime is over, so they'll just keep eating and eating and eating throughout the night, and they'll really quickly go through all the food resources in an area. This is especially bad with migratory birds because they'll eat all the food resources in an area, they'll migrate to a different area where there are more food resources, only to find they've gotten there months in advance and maybe these food resources aren't ready. So with all of these observable adverse effects, the term light pollution has been coined. And you guys have probably heard the term light pollution before. Yeah. And within the national parks, precautionary measures have been implemented to mitigate some of the effects of light pollution. So in 1991, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada began designating areas as dark sky preserves. And so today in Canada, if you look on this map here, there are 19 different dark sky preserves, 3 of which in Canada are the largest in the world. There is Wood Buffalo Provincial Park, there is Jasper National Park, and there's also Mount Magnetic Dark Sky Preserve in Quebec. So if either of you guys speak French, I'm really sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. But those are the 3 largest in the world. And they're great for a lot of reasons. To look at stars, like the constellations that we were learning about earlier on our snowshoe tour here.
but also it really, really helps to lessen the impact that artificial light has on the wildlife. There's a whole manual that has a bunch of really specific definitions for what can and cannot be a dark sky preserve. You have to meet all these crazy requirements, but basically just boils down to how much light is being produced in an area and where. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not practical to just all turn off our lights. But looking at tactics used by dark sky preserves, we can help lessen the impact of light pollution on our environment. So for example, in some preserves, special streetlights are being used that direct their light downwards with more intention instead of just allowing the light to spill all over the place. We can actually use our headlamps to kind of demonstrate how these street lamps work. So take off your headlamp and hold it, turn it on, and we're gonna hold it really high above our heads. Okay, and just kind of point it straight out. So yes, the light is spilling towards the ground, but it's also lighting up the undersides of all of these trees above our heads. But if we move it down to our hips and tilt them down just a little bit, suddenly look at all the darkness that we've created. So you guys can turn your headlamps off and put them away. There are also special street lamp designs that have different casings than conventional street light designs. So if you look here, this is one of these newer light preserving street lamp casings that are being used in some cities around the world. The light can't spill out of the corners and all around and upwards. It just goes down. So you're probably pretty familiar with images like this that show light pollution coming from all cities in North America. So imagine how different this picture might look if we had these street lamps. It's a very small change, but this map could look a lot darker. And I don't want to leave you all feeling guilty. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Humanity's impact on the environment is far-reaching, but the good news is that when it comes to light pollution, every little bit really does help. So consider installing outdoor lights that have a downward focus, like with our headlamps, or putting them on a timer so they're not on all night unnecessarily. It'll help with your electricity bill too. And consider just closing your curtains to lessen the light spilling out onto the street. So light pollution has real observable effects on the wildlife we share our planet with. Artificial light is necessary for our lives, but that doesn't mean we can't always strive to do better.
We made it! Nice! High five! Good job, guys! So before I'm going to say goodbye, I would like to thank you very much for joining me on this tour. You could see how busy this place is with all the grooming and snowmaking, but as soon as we stepped off the main runs, we could see the rarely seen world of darkness and light. You've learned about the northern lights, about constellations, as well as how important darkness actually is. So I would like to encourage you to take this home with you and think about how dark is your backyard. If you can do something to encourage the darkness. Like with every pollution, every bit of a help helps. And if we care, we can make sure that the darkness remains. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.